Hey there guys, we're taking a look at Spider-Man Remastered running on the AMD Ryzen 5 5560U. Now the game is currently running right here at 720p with the lowest in-game graphics, but we're not using any upscale technology. Now I'm just showing you the game running like this because we're going to be taking a look at FSR and the built-in temporal upscaler to see what the performance is actually like and if we can actually get this to be pretty playable. Now the game running at 720p, it is not going to be a good experience. It's really rough. We're not even able to hit a 30 FPS average. The 1% lows are pretty much at a range that is going to be very, very rough for a lot of people to try to play. It's certainly not completely unplayable, but it's close to it. But if we switch things up and actually activate FSR 2.0 to actually see how it performs in here, we'll see if we can actually squeeze out some more performance and maybe even have it look a little bit better than it does right now. Now this is FSR 2.1 and the level of performance that we're getting at the ultra performance setting is not really that impressive. We're pretty much looking at levels of performance that are almost identical to running this game at 720p native, though the 1% lows do actually see a uplift because we are running at a much lower resolution than just 720p. And even though there is a bump in 1% lows, the averages don't stray too far away from where we were at before, and overall the level of performance that we're getting is going to be decent enough, though nothing incredible, mostly due to the fact that all the derivatives of FSR 2.0, which includes 2.0, 2.1, and 2.2, essentially have a performance overhead because of the fact that they do have to do more in the background than just upscale and run a filter like the original FSR. So while we do see some uplift, it's not really enough to make this a completely playable experience, though I think that for a lot of people, especially if you're used to playing games on an iGPU, this might be good enough for you. The biggest issue is really just the fact that the edges of everything kind of just fall apart. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And now, of course, the game also does have a temporal anti-aliasing upscaler that is built into the engine itself. So if we switch over to that, we can see if that can maybe alleviate the performance overhead that FSR 2 is supposed to essentially have. And once we do that, you can see that at least performance-wise, it's for the most part sticking to around the same levels. And it's doing really just a couple of FPS better than FSR, though it is actually noticeably worse in a lot of sections. Of course, it is also running at the lowest ultra performance mode. In some ways, it can actually look better than FSR, but in a lot of other ways, it looks noticeably worse. And that I think that the overall image is just not as good as FSR 2.0, but it does have at least a minor improvement in performance. Though at this low of a level, I really don't think it's going to be that noticeable of an uplift. So in general, you really don't lose anything by going with FSR in this because the game is already bordering on playability. I'm sure there are people out there that will look at these performance numbers and think that it's perfectly fine to play like this, and if that's you, we'll go right ahead. But I can understand if someone just decides to not play like this because they consider it to be too low of a performance level. But it is interesting that we can actually have the different options here. It also has Intel's own upscaler built in, and of course DLSS. Now we could have tested it with Intel's, but Intel's has been known to just perform noticeably worse than FSR on non-ARC based GPUs. Of course, we can try to lower the resolution down to 720p and then use FSR or the temporal upscaler to see if that can actually give us any kind of an uplift whatsoever. So we can just switch to that right now. And here we have 720p with FSR on, and the level of performance that we're getting is at least slightly better, though the 1% lows really aren't seeing much of an uplift at all. It's mostly the averages that get a nice little boost there. But overall, the playability has not changed much at all, but we are now getting some severe smudging at the edges of practically everything, and it looks pretty rough. And I also tried it with the temporal upscaler, and the level of performance was pretty much identical, as well as having the same visual issues. So we're pretty much at this point pushing the limits of this tech, and the game is just not handling that well at all. And considering that we're not seeing much of an uplift in the 1% lows, it's overall really disappointing to see. And just for the fun of it, I actually just lowered the in-game resolution to the lowest that it will actually let you go for the native resolution, and that is essentially 800 by 600. So we're running this at pretty much 600p, and the level of performance that we're getting here is decent enough, I guess, in the sense that the 1% lows are at least above 20 consistently for the most part, and averages of 30 are not exactly completely unplayable, though it is pretty disappointing considering we have to run this at such a low resolution. Things do look pretty rough just in terms of the fact that at this low of a resolution, it really feels like you're playing an old mobile game from the DS and PSP era, back when mobile gaming was actually, using a handheld device instead of just your phone. So really in general, this game is just extremely demanding on this chip, and even at this low of a resolution with the lowest in-game graphics settings, you just cannot get decent enough levels to happily play this, because you really have to sacrifice a lot in resolution just to get this. But anyways, I hope you found this video interesting and useful, and if you did, be sure to subscribe. And also, we do now have memberships enabled on the channel, so if you would like to support that way, please go right ahead. It will help so much build the future of this channel, and any support like that is greatly appreciated. I'll see you guys in the next one.